Hello and welcome to Tales from the Pit, the behind the lens access to the entertainment world and some of the creative people involved. We have a very, very, very active person who I don't even know where to begin, but Matt Hanrahan, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be here. Thanks for pronouncing my name right. You're one of the few, the proud. I like that.
It's rare that I do that, but I'm glad that I did.
Yeah.
As I said, you got so much stuff. I mean, you sent me a list of your stuff and your history, and there's just so much. I don't even know where to begin. So why don't we just start with your early days? How did you get started?
Yeah,
all that sort of stuff.
At the beginning.
Yeah.
Was swimming around inside of my mother, and then I was outside. The best way I could describe my history is, I was in love with music and concerts, and I wanted to be in a band. I was in a band eventually, and I also was a DJ. And, I had, varied local regional success with both of those things. The band in particular got some love, and I got to play with bands that I worshiped. So, kind of came up the indie, I was in Connecticut, but I was close to New York City. So we played, CBGB's even, and I played at Coney Island High and Mercury Lounge, Seminole Wetlands, many venues that are no longer with us, unfortunately. But I remember reading that Perry Farrell in early Jane's Addiction days was like, we need to, play with these bands. So he would book concerts and book the bands that they wanted to open for. And I copied that with our band. And then, as often happens, my band fizzled out, but I knew how to book and I knew how to promote. And so I started doing that for wherever I could, which was either helping other bands I knew and liked, or eventually for, music venues. So there happened to be a cool music venue in the town where I was growing up in Connecticut. It was then called the Globe Theater. I think it's now called Wall Street or something. And I went in there literally because I saw that David Lee Roth from Van Halen was playing there, and I was really excited about that. And I was like, "Hey, are you hiring?" And I think I was the bar back at 18 for a week, and I had never bar backed. I told him I did it all the time, of course. And I started eventually bartending. And then I started booking, and I was I got one night a week or one show once in a blue moon there and some other places. So I became literally a talent buyer, which I didn't know that was a word then, a booker, promoter. And I'd run around, literally putting up posters and flyers and then calling, as you did back then, and faxing offers to booking agents in New York and going to other shows and meeting other club owners. And how do you do this? Basically trial by fire. And, but that wound up being some really, amazing shows in those days. There were some really killer bands that I got to book, these great bands that I loved, and then help my friends' bands. And I met this guy, Scotty Mars, a shout out to Scotty Mars, who was a DJ. He had also been in signed bands too, but he was a DJ remixer, which to me was another world of electronic music, dance music. It wasn't even called, EDM like it is now. This is in the 90s. And we had this club in Westchester that I would book bands at, that I also used to play at before that. And then he would come in at 11 o'clock when the bands were done, and DJs until 4 a.m. And it was this whole other crowd would come in, pay a whole nother cover. And they were basically raves, nightclub events. So I learned all about that too, as that was exploding. And I got heavy into that world as a promoter of that music, booker of that music, artist manager of that music. I helped these guys with literally a label. And years later, I was working for a dance music magazine. And then I wanted to travel. So I was well, the magazine should do release parties, that kind of thing. And I would go to some club in Denver or Miami or wherever. And then I got into, tour managing because of that. And, all the stuff that came with it. I started throwing events at, Miami Winter Music Conference every year, like every March, there was South by Southwest and then that, and like CMJ and all these things that were still very different then. They were like wild and awesome times. And we'd run around with like a sack of records and like promote. And, some of those parties were crazy. Those were like crazy wild times. But yeah, it got me into more and more just learning and calling and making connections. And I was always pretty naturally outgoing, and I would, ask anybody to do anything. And, that put me out on the road. And then, some of those electronic artists blew up. Some of those indie bands blew up, like the Incubuses of the world and things like that. They became huge. I booked like Limp Bizkit, their first ever like Hartford, Connecticut show. And, as they were like a week later, like the Nookie like was on MTV, like a crazy pivotal time for both those bands. Incubus, same thing. They were like kind of unknown. No one would play them on the radio. And then by the time we did that Hartford show, all those like radio DJs were like kissing their asses. Yeah, we supported your show. Or like, I'm like, no, you didn't. Yeah. But now that they're selling out and going on Family Values tour, we all love them. But anyways, whatever. That shit still happens today. But that one thing led to another. I of course moved into New York City because I lived nearby. I kept like running club nights, and I was working, like I said, for this DJ mag, working with bands, still playing with bands, and that got me like I worked with a band that was friends of mine, and we wound up getting those guys on the Warped Tour. So like Enter the Warped Tour, and that again, amazing experience, and a lot of other great bands we met during that time. Caves from the Lords of Brooklyn, amazing guys, Renaissance Man. Me and him worked together on stuff even years later, like in a whole different area, like designing wine bottles for, because he was like a sick painter and a graphic artist. And, it's funny. It's like, I haven't thought through this in ages, but it just kind of, while I'm probably missing things, it kind of just keeps going and going in that sort of same way of like, well, this opportunity, either I created it or it presented itself and I ran with it. And, somewhere along the lines, I was, here I was, this is a good angle for you. I was super always like the new thing, the cutting edge, right? Cool kind of indie and metal and alternative music and whatever it was, all this underground rave stuff. And then somehow I wound up working for NSYNC of all bands, right? Like there couldn't be anything more opposite of what I had going on. But oddly enough, at the time, they were a stadium act. This was their Pop Odyssey tour, stadiums. Nothing I was doing was selling out stadiums. And they also, like, for some credibility, like, in no disrespect to that band, they're super talented guys. I just wasn't into it. But then, like, they were getting remixes done by some like DJs I liked. So I was like, okay, these guys they know what break beats are and house music. So it kind of made me feel good. But more than anything, it was sitting there on like the first show I was at, which was like Soldier Field in Chicago, which is like the biggest football stadium we've ever seen, where like the Bears play. And I'm at like the 50-yard line, and their stage is at the time as big as like the Rolling Stones stage. And I'm like going, holy shit, this is like mega. This is like dream level stuff. And I used all of those learnings and connections, and I chased after the production manager and the stage manager and the, TK guys. Why do we do this? How do we do that? Entering sponsorship world, they had multi-million-dollar sponsorships I was helping to manage, so I understood that. And ironically, a lot of those same guys I wound up working with years later when the Rolling Stones came calling, and I went on tour with the Rolling Stones, the biggest rock band in the world, for about a year and a half, because they tour and tour and tour as they do, not a summer tour, like a year tour. I wound up doing 2 world tours with the Rolling Stones, so that's like 3 years of my life, and more countries than I ever thought I would ever see. More cities than I thought I'd ever see. And again, just working with these amazing professional mega levels, like a long way from the, the VFW that my band played back in the day for 50 kids. It's the biggest thing ever. And everywhere you can take it. And a lot of great relationships, a lot of great experiences and great learnings, and, something that I may or may not be doing again soon. And so, that's been a lot of really, great stuff there. And that opened up again, like just more doors for me to kind of keep going and working with more artists. And I've got actually a partner who lives out your way in Portland, Maine, that I knew through booking, Jason Legassi. Shout out to Jason. Yeah. We run the Outlier group together. Jason books a ton of New England shows. Yep. You probably met him or been around him or been to some of the shows anyways.
Yeah, we've talked.
We got an awesome band right now. Jason recently brought onto the roster called 12OC, awesome country band. Those guys, this time, by the time I guess this airs, this isn't now, right? This airs later.
This will be in spring. Yeah.
Yeah. So they'll have new music out by that. Tomorrow there's a new song that's going to explode. I think it's going to be their winner.
Yep.
And me and him met because I was also working with another.
I was going to say, just to pause you right there, I do all of 12OC's promo photos and videos.
Oh, awesome. Well, nice work, man. I should know that, but it's really Jason, that's his, he's the quarterback on that one and discovered those guys. And so Jason and I started working together because we had common friends and we had both have a relationship with the band Anthrax that I've been friendly with and working with forever. And my childhood friend, Pearl, who is, Scott Ian's wife, and her father was Meatloaf, the rock legend. We continued working together, and she's an outlier artist as well. So Jason and I think Pearl was doing some dates back then up in Maine, and we kind of met. And I was also working with WWE, who I worked for 8 years around the world, which is another crazy story I could spend a whole episode on. But so all of those pieces somehow, believe it or not, do kind of connect and do help each other and, make these crazy experiences come to like sort of where I am now. I'm kind of skipping some like marketing branding. The like brand and entertainment thing has been, I should maybe not skip, a big part of my life and career. After those Stones tours and a few others, I kind of like, I don't know if I want to go back on the road or as often. I would still travel a lot. I started working in-house at a marketing agency, which was very much in the music space. So like Heineken at the time was their client, and they like wanted to, activate at Coachella or at, the Rock the Bells Festival or whatever cool music thing, or, obviously other lifestyle stuff. And I chased after that world for a long time. I wound up having my own office down on the Lower East Side of New York. Did crazy stuff for like Dos Equis around the time of the Most Interesting Man campaign. We did like a tour with like Angelo Moore from Fishbone as the host, which was awesome with all these variety acts and just crazy, like whatever crazy shit we could dream up. Somehow we would do it for major brands and keep, as I always said, kept us deep in the realm that we were best at, which was entertainment. Because I remember there was some business on occasion that would come up and it's like, what's the entertainment factor there? Other than just like a playlist in the background. It's like, there's agencies who do that for a living. That's not what we do. Like, that's fine. No respect to those, like disrespect to those guys. But I always was like, those guys wear like khaki pants and live in Connecticut, ironically where I was from. And like, we're in Lower East Side, we're edgy, we know about rap or whatever, And, but that stuff really, supported so much of what I did then, what I continue to do. Usually I tell people what I do, I say brand and entertainment. They don't necessarily know what that is or think that's just my company name, which is a really good company name, actually. But right. Somewhere that circles back to and around here. I made music videos and I put on concerts and worked on award shows and a million other things that we could talk about if we want. But I think I just kind of got you pretty close to where I am now as an old man approaching 50 in a few months, if you can believe that.
Well, like I said, there's a lot to unpack there. There's a ton of stuff, and we haven't even touched half of it.
Yeah, we can do this on chapter 5.
No kidding, huh? All right, so let's just go back. I want to just ask a few questions about a few things. So, are you still playing
guitar?
Are you still music? Yeah, you still doing music?
I play music every day if I can, even if that's just drumming on the desk. I can't stop. It's always in my head. It's how I wake up in the morning and I go to sleep at night. I have guitars, oddly not one right behind me, but right where you can't see on the other side. Every room in my house, there's a guitar for sure. And plus like way too many or not enough, depending on how you look at it, in cases downstairs. And I have a drum kit and I'm kind of building a little studio here once my flooding problem stops and here in Southern California of all places.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm involved in music always. I don't play quite as often as I'd like. I'm not in an organized band currently, but it's who I am and what I do and what moves me. I go to concerts as much as I can. I listen to music always. It's on in the house. And yeah, the long version is yes, I still play. Yeah. I've even done some like music for some producer composers that I'm friends with or work with. And I've like did some twangy, Gretsch, guitar-y kind of Clint Eastwood country, sounding stuff for like a Aflac ad once. And it was like an awesome experience. Yeah.
That's cool. That's awesome, dude. Yeah.
That's what I love more than anything. I'll drop anything in a minute to do something with music,
That's, me too. I'm very similar in that aspect. I grew up on guitar as well and vocals and stuff like that. Nice. having my projects, but I just haven't had any time with all the current stuff we got going on. And, like I said, I work with 12OC a lot and a few other bands that are kind of blowing up, and I just watch that and I'm just like, oh, I miss it so much. I just want to do that stuff so much. Yeah. But that's my money's over here. My money maker's over here instead of over there. So
follow the money. I get it. Listen, I mean, there's a million stories like that where, you look at a lot of people that are behind the scenes used to be on the other side of it, and it's still awesome to be there. But I can tell you, I've been on some, I don't know, tours or events. I remember when I was on this bruiser of a tour back in the day, and I was like, and I remember like talking to one of the guys in the band, and I was like, man, I don't mind. Like, I'm here with you guys, but you get that 30 minutes or whatever their set was on stage each night to still have that moment and get it all out of you and connect with the crowd and just with each other. Like, I'm not having that here. I'm like, backstage, like making sure the truck is going to be ready to come get us out of here. So that was hard to get over, but you're still supporting their dreams, and it's still part of your dreams. So it's so great. But yeah, man, I mean, there's nothing in the world I can ever, compare to the feeling, even just rehearsing and jamming with other people. It's the best thing in the world. Like, just like looking around and like knowing someone's going somewhere and leading you to where they're going and hitting or getting lost and coming back. It's magic. It's magic.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm blessed that I get to do, I get to be with the camera and it's like, just capture those moments. So I'm really excited and thankful for that. But man, I just kind of wish that I was up there too,
Of course. But by the way, having shot a lot of shows, I've never really been, I've taken plenty of still photos, but there was a time where I was doing a lot of videography. In fact, I'd made a bunch of videos for Anthrax. And so I would be on stage and or in the pit. And I don't know if you've ever been to an Anthrax show.
Yep.
First of all, those guys don't stop moving. Like, even at their, Scott Ian is 60 years old now, and they jump and run like maniacs. And the crowd behind you, if you're in the pit, they're going over your head the whole time. You got to keep looking or you're going to, get hit. I've taken a lot of lumps shooting their shows, but it's an amazing experience that, with modern day festivals and barricades, most people never get that close, club shows aside. And even then, so it is pretty damn close, but still not the same thing. You're not hitting those chords or hitting those drums.
Yeah. You're not feeling awesome. That power. Yeah, totally. So let's, if you don't mind, let's talk a few minutes about the Rolling Stones stuff, because that is just massive, and that's just something you don't just walk over. You toured with the Rolling Stones through multiple tours across the world. What was your role? How did you get that job? What was your role in that job? And any stories along the way?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's funny. I was actually on tour. A buddy of mine who came up around the same, we always say we came up at the same time together. My friend Matt Peliquin, awesome guy, a production manager, tour manager. He had been a talent buyer. We both worked at the same club. He first went out on the road with a band, the Average White Band, a legendary, funk band from the 70s. Greatest guys, a couple of Scottish dudes and then some, other dudes. And just like, I was out helping him on like they had like a short run somewhere. I forget, California we were. And the Stones tour had actually already started that year, if I remember correctly. And a buddy of mine called me and was like, hey, this thing just came up. Can you be in, I think it was Giant Stadium at the time or Gillette or one of those. I forget what that first show on that tour was, and I was like, what even is it? And he's like, they basically had a huge sponsorship at the time, of course, multi-million-dollars. And they needed someone to just manage it and deal with, the band was doing meet and greets. It's before there was like VIP experience you could pay for. So the people were meeting with actual, I guess, VIPs, not that people pay for it aren't, but you know what I mean? It was somebody who knew somebody, sometimes radio winners, but it would be like, also Robert Kraft at Gillette or something who owns the Patriots, or like, whatever it happened to be. So there was some signage and some branding. There was coordination with production, coordination with security and the tour itself. And then, of course, making sure, everything is set for the people that are coming in. In some cases later on, I think when we were in Europe, they were like Black Card members from like American Express. Those are generally very wealthy people who don't know very well. So you got to make sure everybody's super psyched, but also like the band safety, you got to keep it safe. So somebody like the band will probably, Keith Richards type of guy that'll hug you, especially if you're a woman, as would Ronnie Wood. But like, they accidentally grab them by the hand or go to do a handshake and like the guy pops a finger. You got a stadium show not happening. It's a big, there's a lot of concerns. And, just timing and being able to find the right place to do it at the right time and like, what's the best route? So, when you break it down, it doesn't sound too difficult, but when you're traveling around the world doing it and realize that there's still this show, that's the priority is the show and the band that always has to happen first. You do all those things to make it, fly however you need to make it, no matter how crazy. And then that said, I use it as, of course, again, as a learning experience. So here you are with Jake Berry and Opie, and these are the biggest production managers in the world. They only do the biggest tours, the Rolling Stones, AC/DC. I think Opie probably did like some Ozfest and Van Halen stuff before that. They did U2. Just whoever could do the biggest stadium tours, those are the guys that ran it. And here's an opportunity to learn. And so I would do whatever I had to do and then be like, what do you guys need? I could have easily just jumped on the bus and sat there and like waited till everyone was done, but I would get out there and help break down a stage or learn about how the lights come down or the video screens. And, you're around the best guys at every level, from backline to camera to video to rigging. And just like, all of those guys are at points in their life, they've been doing it for decades. And I'm like the new green guy, kind of, at least at that level. So it was just like, tell me about what you do. Like, and can I help you tomorrow when I'm done? Or like you do it a couple of times. And, some of those jobs you do it once or twice, you realize you're going to like maybe lose a finger. So maybe you don't do it so much. And then there's like a saying somebody once told me, like, if you do it once, it's a favor, do it twice, it's a job. So, if you're not there the next day, they're like, what happened? Yeah. But, it was based on the activation, the sponsorships, the meet and greets. And then going back out is because I thankfully did it well the first time, and they like to see the guy they like and trust. And you have relationships that you've built and you've hopefully proven yourself and been known as a guy that's willing to work harder and be helpful. And those are, obviously like kind of obvious things, but I've seen people not get how obvious that is, to the point where, I've been able to years and decades later reach out to people and be like, hey, what would you do in this situation? Or do you know so-and-so? And it's like, these are the busiest guys in the world, but somehow you get an email the next day that's like, yeah, hey, I already CC'd so-and-so, he'll help you with that. And it's like, that's the brotherhood of the road in one way. And also like, doing the work and earning your keep and, being someone that's reliable and honest. And of course, returning the favor when it's your turn to help somebody else.
So you toured with them for 2 years, you said, right?
I think it was a year and a half each tour. So about 3 years with, there was the 40 Licks and then the Bigger Bang were the two tours I worked on. Yeah. And, we went to everywhere, like with those guys, as they do. And always in one of the stadiums always, but they also did, arenas. And the 40 Licks tour also played some theaters, which was really cool. We played the Beacon Theater in New York City, which is, small for them. And they did 2 nights. If I remember correctly, it was like Halloween. And the first night was like Bill Clinton's birthday. So like he came down, like sat like at the balcony, but earlier came and like literally shook every single one of our hands, like of the whole huge crew, took time. And Martin Scorsese, Marty Scorsese, like he's my friend, he shot those 2 shows for the Shine the Light documentary, which was, an unbelievable experience to see him working and be at this show. And of course, that because of that movie, they stacked the deck with guests, Jack White and like, I think Christina Aguilera. A lot of amazing people jumped up on stage, sort of like The Last Waltz, with Scorsese also made, but with the Stones. Fantastic. If you haven't seen it, it's really good. So that was an amazing experience, all just in one weekend. Just like a crazy. Yep. And the Stones did like a lot of work to make sure people bootleg or, scalpers couldn't get those tickets. So we had to like invent a way to make it like you had to come with the person you were with. And, we made it harder than it should have been to sell that show out, but it was worth it for the fans,
Damn. So were you tour managing for that, or what was your role?
I wasn't the Rolling Stones tour manager. So the Rolling Stones have, first of all, each guy in the band has like a tour manager, and then there's like a tour director overall, and there's like obviously, like I said, Jake Berry and Opie and these like veterans that are the production managers. So I managed the sponsorships on those tours, and then assisted production everywhere I could.
Yep. Wow. That's amazing. That's awesome to be able to do. I mean, something that massive, to be on the road for something that massive.
It was crazy. Yeah. And then ironically, years later, I wound up, first I did a bunch of tour management jobs in between too, like, one bus in a truck or a couple, and tons of production events and festival events. And I did a great, like this VIP side stage during the Rock the Bells Festival at Randall's Island in New York, which was like when Rage Against the Machine came back with like, and then like every cool, hip hop artist ever, Wu-Tang Clan, Public Enemy, all these guys, amazing thing we did. And, I worked at a lot of really fun, events with great musicians and legendary, performances of all sizes, everywhere. And then I wound up, working with WWE, which was kind of ironic to me because I was born in Stamford, Connecticut, and where they're from. And I actually used to live on the actual same exit on 95. And I must have passed that building a million times in my life, but never once thought maybe I'll work for those guys. I don't know why. I knew people who did. And actually through the Stones, a buddy of mine who worked for WWE was kind of a heavy hitter there. He like the Stones, like a lot of people. And like he came out, his sister came out, we talked a lot. He was always like, why don't you work with us? It's like the same thing. I'm like, I don't know if it's the same thing. We play a lot of the same venues, which is like kind of what he meant production wise. But I wound up going out there and I was producing like eventually like 200 live events a year, which is like, arena shows like all over the US, every state, including Alaska, including Puerto Rico and Hawaii. And then like 30 or 40 countries, places I hadn't even been with the Stones. The first time ever they allowed American entertainment in Saudi Arabia, Cairo, like, the craziest places anywhere. The first thing was one of the first shows in Russia, like in Moscow, and like just amazing, crazy stuff I would have ever thought I would have ever done in a million years. In that case, I'm on the headset calling the show, like calling every cue, like lights, sound, video, talking to guys in their ear and their IFBs and the host, and eventually, casting and training and working with new hosts and developing the, tech team and working with all those amazing people too. And again, like veterans of not only in ring, but behind the scenes, and we're getting to work around, Vince and Triple H and the guys who literally run the company, and Stephanie McMahon, all these like amazing people that all just know so much about this crazy, unique thing that the world loves. And WrestleMania is a stadium-sized event now. So are some of the pay-per-views, but also just I was calling the show at Madison Square Garden 4 times a year or something like that. A couple of times with literally Vince standing right behind me and Stephanie on the other side, and just going like, just the sweat coming out of my body as I'm about like 3, 2, 1, go for whatever, which I've done a million times, but because it's at the Garden with a sold out $1 million house and the head cheese right behind me and his daughter and sometimes his son, like pressure, but again, those were amazing, amazing experiences. And the crossover in my life of like, hey, my friend's band is going to play on this thing, or we got involved. And when NXT, which was WWE's like kind of minor league, we went to like Danny Wimmer rock festivals and Download, the biggest metal rock festival in the world in UK, 100,000 people. We had wrestling in a giant side stage, and just like all of that camaraderie, seeing all your friends, and like sometimes doing stuff that crossed over was, unreal. It gives me, great memories to think about it now.
Hey, I just want to jump in here real quick and say that if you're enjoying the show, please check us out on all podcast locations and on YouTube. Search for Tales from the Pit podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe. It helps us grow the show. All right, back to the show. So that whole WWE stuff, that's insane, because that's just everyone. Insane. Yeah, everyone loves it. I mean, it's all over the place. It never ends. It's always moving forward with new stories or whatever. How do you prepare? How did you prepare for that? Because that was probably I'm assuming all brand new for you.
So I had called shows, but not pro wrestling. I had called, sports. I had been involved in a couple of events that had like Thai boxing and some other things like that. But I'd also called like some off-Broadway. I produced this crazy off-Broadway theater show with this genius, Randy Weiner. Shout out to Randy, a real genius. A great masterpiece that we produced in New York City called Caligula Maximus, which is an awesome show. If you missed it, you missed out. And I would call cues and produce that show. And like, I understood all that kind of like staging. And I had worked at like, a show at the Fringe Festival in Edinburgh with Jim Rose and these other maniacs. And so, that's just being clear. And first of all, I should say, like, I learned so much at that job because while I had done a lot of production, it has and a lot of stuff in my life, I had to do everything. I remember one of the first things I was doing was asking this production director, Duncan Leslie, a legend in the business. I kept asking him about like labor and loadouts and all this stuff. And he was like, we have someone who will do that. And I'm like, yeah, but really? Because wouldn't I do that? It was a different kind of a job in certain ways where I didn't have, even though I was happy to help and be involved, there was a production manager and a stage manager, just like something as big as the Stones, where it's too big for one guy. But I had come from often doing everything. So, but it was great. Like, again, so the preparation, like I worked with this other amazing guy, Johnny Greco. He's like a legend in sports entertainment. And me and him started on the same day, on the same job. He had come from like, I think the Cleveland Cavaliers most recently. And like, he understood very clearly the mindset and the sports entertainment thing, and like you see an NBA game, there's a lot of crisscross. And so I was coming more from like live music and festivals, but I think the variety stuff really helped me. The Angelo, Most Interesting Man, all those shows. I produced this crazy thing called City Chase, which was like the kind of like Fear Factor meets The Amazing Race. And I would go sit up in the seat, in the 100 level or whatever, and just go, what do I need here? Like, what's going to connect to me? I would go to other wrestling shows and go, what else can we do? What's new in technology? What's happening in the crowd? How do you keep the old school guys happy, but also reach the new generation? And like, how do you bring social media into this and all that stuff? And that's really, it was about experimentation and trying things and sometimes realizing like your idea doesn't work, but you can pitch it. So I was always just happy to have a seat at the table. And I remember once I asked Triple H something, and he's like, hey, I remember he said no, which was fine, but he told me why it was no. And I thought that was really cool, like it was like, there's some mentality here. And then, and it's also great because every now and then you do have an idea that gets a great a pop, as they would call it in wrestling, and you do it in front of a sold out arena. And then you realize, wow, we could do that again tomorrow night or next week or on and on. And some of those things, they're doing today. So, that live event producer, which was my title job, didn't exist really prior to me starting it. I believe Vince and therefore Triple H and Stephanie had decided to really invest in the live events and really make the experience like they used to have these, what they would call house shows. And they'd be like in, secondary markets where it's like the ring and like just music and a little truss above it. And then they had like Raw with this big giant video wall, and sometimes people would go to one and be like, oh, I thought that's what this was. So we tried to kind of bring those two together, add video, add more production, keep the storylines going on and off, and like through, literally bringing all these other, cameras to the live events, social media to the live events, and hosts that weren't just the stick man, like Michael Buffer type announcer they had historically had. It was more of a colorful character, and I don't know that I could have prepared in any way except for just to sink or swim. Just learn and read and watch,
observe as much as you can. Yeah. For WWE, they're rolling into a new town every day, setting up, shooting it, or explain to me how that whole structure.
Yeah, it's a monster, right? Yeah. So WWE, which by the way, like I learned half of that. I thought I knew what it was too. And it's crazier than I thought. But like you have, like with the Rolling Stones, because the tour is so massive, and even though they move the way they move, there's 3 sets of steel that are moving around the U.S. or therefore the world. So like there's a steel team that will go lay the skeleton down, and then the show comes, puts the decking in the video, and then takes some of that and goes, and then another steel team takes that down, and they just leapfrog to keep it moving. Where with WWE, you've got like live event trucks that go around all the time. Like WWE is mostly weekends. Historically, they've changed their schedule a bit over the years, but it's generally been live event Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Raw TV. The SmackDown has moved around a bit. And this is before they added NXT, a whole nother tour. But those trucks would be literally, like you said, going into town like a touring band, bringing the truck, dumping it down, building the ring, putting up lights and steel and building out the backstage and everything else that goes into making a show, and then tearing it down after the show's over and driving overnight somewhere else. And but the TV and the pay-per-view stuff generally is moving at its own as well, because they're playing, sometimes the Monday. So that rig will be ahead of it, going ahead, and some other trucks are sort of floating around. And there's rings in cargo ships moving ahead, that are like, one maybe in Australia. There's a lot of stuff now in the UK and Europe because they do all these tours and they have to like get them done and then fly the guys back to be in like whatever Memphis for Monday Night Raw after being in like Australia for a week. It's insane.
That's crazy. Now for you,
it all looks like that map that Charlie Day has with all the lines behind him from Sunny.
Yeah, totally. Now for you, it was mostly you said Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or weekend type shows for you. Were you traveling during the week as well during that, or are you home based?
You still got to get there, right? So usually you would fly on Thursday for a Friday show. And then if you come back on Monday or Tuesday, depending on what days you're doing there. But also when NXT was starting, I was sometimes then flying down to Orlando and then home for like a day to pack my bag or have a day off. And then we would also sometimes do a regular domestic loop and then fly to Europe and do 10 back-to-back shows there and then come back. Or we'd fly all the way to Australia. And when you go to Australia, you land in like Sydney, for example. You would do a show that day or the next day, and then you fly either that night or the next morning to like Melbourne or then to like Perth and so on, and then come back. So just constantly flying or driving on a bus.
Wow. And
then sometimes, again, back home for a loop. Eventually, I was there with them 8 years. It was crazy. We were allowed to hire some more producers, and some of them were full-timers and some of them were freelancers that would kind of like, okay, look, this distance is too far here. So you're going to go ahead and we're going to leapfrog producers, which was a hell of a lot more doable and better. And also like life gets in the way, like someone's wife got pregnant, like guy's not going to be around for that moment, or just the timing, or even like mostly for logistic reasons, but just quality of life for sure. But yeah, I mean, it was, I lived, out of a suitcase in the air. I think I once looked at how many miles and how many hours in the air, and it was over like 8 years, and it was like a year or so. And by the way, 8 years is like the longest I've done anything. But there's guys from WWE that have been there for like 20 years. John D'Amico, shout out to John D'Amico. I think he's got 30 years or something. One of the original employees from old back in the day when they just had like a box truck with a ring, no big production. That guy's seen it all and done it all. It's like a cup of coffee. My career was what they would call it. When you've only been around for a minute. And here I am.
Amazing.
Here's my cup of coffee.
Amazing. Yeah. So I do a lot of photography. I work for a bank in the Hampshire Pavilion, which is up in Meadowbrook. I see a lot of the WWE guys coming through there for like Chris Stapleton and stuff like that. So I see them. Shows quite often. So
Fandango lives up there, I think, right? One of those guys.
I think so. Man, yeah. So that's a lot of stuff. And so your role through the entire WWE or towards the end of your WWE was always just focused on the production style.
WWE was a real, a crossover of a creative job and a production job, because we were literally sitting there with what they used to call agents, which are like talent producers, generally ex-wrestlers, many of which are like legends, like Arn Anderson and these guys and Mike Rotunda. We worked with the best guys. And they would focus more like, the real, choreography with the guys, and we would kind of coordinate stuff, but we would also plan out when everything's going to run, like kind of like a tech director, tech producer. And then also, how it's going to interact in any pre-show promotion, intermission, dealing with any sponsorship stuff, any ads, and then of course you got guys running around with iMag with cameras. So you've got go to camera, go to the graphic, go to the whatever. So there's always, it's a ton going. If you ever get to listen to a show on headset, it's crazy to hear how much is going on while an entrance or an exit or a victory or a match is happening. It's kind of insane, really. Yeah. It never stops.
Wow. All right. So I could talk to you all day long about both Rolling Stones and WWE, but after that, where do you go from there? I mean, it looks like you have an indie record label. You have a bunch of other projects. You've done.
I mean, a lot of these things were things I was kind of always doing. For some reason, I was such a glutton for punishment that even while I was on tour with bands or out with the WWE for all those years, I was like, oh, I should still probably try to make videos, or I should like plan a concert series, or, I was still doing like club shows at like Webster Hall in New York for a long time. But I was also working with like bands that I liked or was friends with, or was officially managing, depending on the relationship or the need. And and a lot of, artists, when they're independent, when you're the manager, you're like also the booking agent often. Sometimes you're lucky enough to have a booking agent. Sometimes you're working in tandem with booking agents. Sometimes you're supporting their efforts or, kind of like kicking down doors for them to go and do it. Really, it depends on the level. So I did all of that kind of stuff all the time. And I also had like an awesome friend, Josh Bernstein. I'll shout out to Josh, who's like an amazing guy. He also works in a ton of music and marketing. And he used to like run Revolver Magazine and AP and All Press and Loudwire. And he would like put on these award shows. So I would jump in and like help Josh as a producer or a stage manager or whatever, like, you're my boy, I got you kind of stuff. And, that same thing could apply to even like just recently, I have this like long relationship with, as I said, Pearl, who I manage, and Anthrax, who I'm good friends. We consider it a family. And Scotty turned 60 years old. So I was stage managing his unbelievable New Year's Eve 60th birthday party, which was like the sickest collection of, music legends jamming, songs. Jerry Cantrell singing Billy Joel is probably the best example I could give you. And, that was something anyone else would ask me, I'd probably said no, because it's a lot to do, but it's an honor and a pleasure to do it with those guys and for those guys. And, I still, like I said, initially, I have passion for it. It still gets the little fuzzies on the back of my neck up when it's going on. I sometimes still wonder how the fuck I got to be so fortunate to be in these situations. I was at a studio not long ago where like Dave Grohl came walking in, and those guys on the fly wound up making a Bad Brains cover. And just because I stopped by for lunch, you know what I mean?
Sweet.
And I was just like, how is this my life? I do that all the time. I have to pinch myself sometimes.
That's crazy. Yeah. I mean, you're surrounded by such amazing, talented people.
It's been unbelievable, man. Yeah.
But I mean, it's also a credit to your skill set and your work that you're around all these people. So that's really awesome. Congratulations on everything.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's definitely it's a labor of love, but for sure there's some labor in there. But when it works out, man, it's magic. When you it's the little things, like you dig through, you find the contact, you get it through. Somehow the artist you manage gets that gig or gets that nice write up, or you look out and you're like, wow, the place is packed, or like you're opening for somebody who's bigger than you, or you see the magic happen right then and there. Pearl was out with, Cody Jinks recently. Cody's this amazing, if you don't know, independent, the biggest independent country artist in the world, is also like a rock and roller. And they have a song that's going to come out soon on Cody's next record, which is a duet, the Faith No More cover that they kind of went country with. And I swear, I was telling Cody, I was like, did you see it earlier? Like when she came out, it was like watching like A Star Is Born when like Lady Gaga comes out with Bradley Cooper, because like they kind of know who she is. She's opened up, but he brings her out and like he starts singing it, and then she jumps in and you just watch the crowd pop and then start singing along to a song you barely know. And it's like it hits you so hard that it doesn't matter how many miles you've got to drive, how many calls and emails you got to send, because that's what it is. You come off, you just feel it, and it's amazing.
What? Yeah, I mean, just so much stuff. EA games. Anything specific you can talk about with any of that?
EA was great. Yeah, sure, man. That was a fun. I forgot about that. Thanks for reminding me. That was really fun. I think that was like every now and then I have like Facebook or Instagram memories that pop up, and you're like, oh, That was sick. I forgot about that. Like that was when I was running my own shop in New York, which I called King Size, which was something that I continued through with working with the DJs with Scotty back in the day. And it became like this sort of, brand and entertainment hub. My office in Lower East Side I had mentioned before, around the time of some of the Secchi's stuff. EA Games was like a little piece of business that we had. And they then decided they wanted to push the Need for Speed, we had a new game coming out. And they wanted to do stuff in the music space, and like they wanted what we would now probably call influencers to come to the event. But this is, it's funny because influencers back then wasn't based on like how many likes you have or followers. It was like you just were like a cool person, and you had something to offer. But we put together this tour for them. Like it was like New York. I think it went from New York to Austin to Miami to San Francisco to LA, and then by LA the game comes out. Yeah. So it was cool too, because at the time video was starting to really, like, YouTube was blowing up. So we shot everything, edited it, made it look real slick. And then you could kind of tease the next event with that video and then this. And so the LA one, it's like the whole tour. And it's, we had Mixmaster Mike from the Beastie Boys and like Z-Trip, all these really cool DJs. And it would be, like, just like a bunch of like awesome people and these great venues. We did one at a car club, one at but the Avalon and, Hollywood, and what was it? Something down in Texas around South by Southwest, and like just an amazing experience to work again, like with a different world. In that I had some experience with video gaming. I actually worked on this crazy thing called Game Riot once, which was like when they first like now, where there's like the World Series of video games. This was like these guys that were in like a big tent going to like the Lollapalooza festival, which was a tour at the time, to like with air conditioning and a tent, and like, hey, here's the latest version of Halo. But it required production to build that and travel that around. So I knew that world a little bit. Of course, I enjoyed video games and liked the culture. So yeah, doing that EA Games tour just became like an awesome thing. Like I think Mixmaster Mike and like Dell, the Funky Homo Sapien in San Francisco was maybe the highlight of that tour. Even though Hollywood was like big and over the top, it was just that one was like a little gritty. It felt like where I came from. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. That's fun. I mean, that's so much. Yeah. That's so much cool stuff. So after WWE, what's next for you? Where do you go?
Well, so WWE, I was working still very hard and very often right up until COVID hit, and then so here's a thing. Like as a live guy, most of my business, aside from making videos and getting involved in some other projects, was about gathering people. Be it a little intimate get together, VIP thing, or as many people at a festival or a stadium. And all of a sudden the world stopped allowing people to do that because of this awful thing, COVID. And so firstly, for me, I was home for the first time and for more than like 2 weeks than I had been in like 10 years, or really 20, if you think about the whole career. And so I was like, this isn't so bad. I lived in Venice Beach at the time. I could like ride my bike around and chill out. And I wasn't like going to the airport or worrying about stuff, but we all thought it was going to go back in like 3 months, a month, 6 months. And then it became like, a year, and it was pretty obvious it wasn't coming racing back. And the only, WWE was working still out of a studio in Orlando, which didn't really fall under my category. It was down to just the bare minimum people like in masks and testing. So I did what a lot of my live event brothers and sisters did. And I just was like, first of all, I enjoyed my initial time off, which was an amazing thing. And I was able to have a normal life for a minute. And I had like my mom passed away and a few other rough things during that time. So it was kind of really like, for me, I needed the reset, if you will. I also was like, oh, well, what am I doing next? Am I going back to WWE? Am I going back on the road? Am I going to go back to tours if and when they go back out? Or do I start to try to pivot? So I got involved in like, live streaming and things like that, because that's what was happening. I jumped back in the producer's chair, put the headset on, and I called a bunch of live shows. There was like a couple of people that were doing concerts and comedy and even like charity galas and things like that would normally require a director and or stage manager. I just did it digitally. And then fortunately, as the world reopened, some of those folks had me come and do it live as they became live again. And I just jumped back in. And I started, getting back on, calling friends in the industry. What's next? I almost went right back on tour. I had a couple of cool band opportunities, but I wasn't sure, did I want to get right back to that? But I did wind up like working on this crazy event for this NFT company called Azuki. They did like this massive build out in New York City at this like huge soundstage where we created like this gigantic torii gate, like 50 feet in the air that we projected on, and had like, crazy rappers and like conga dancers and all kinds of, it was a walkthrough experience, like like an immersive thing where like beautiful, like you walked through literally like an alley. It was called Enter the Alley. Like, and it looked like downtown Chinatown, like Blade Runner upside down or something.
Wow.
Even like fake cobblestone and like guys getting tattoos and like, you could buy stuff and taste stuff. So that was like a huge, huge production. It took a long time and then was awesome. And I did a couple, concerts and some festivals, and I produced this amazing tribute to Meatloaf, who had unfortunately passed away during that time, for our friends. And some of the bands I worked with, like Pearl, kind of got active again. We would do some shows. We did some shows with Cody up in Deadwood and a few other tours. And I started also working with these guys, the Raven Drum Foundation, which is an awesome bunch of people. That's Rick Allen, from Def Leppard, and his wife, Lauren Monroe, who's also an amazing musician. They do this amazing groups where they get people together, a lot of which who have suffered, like first responders and veterans, and then just people that have just had, like everybody has something fucked up that happened to them. And through the power and healing of the drum and Lauren's like guidance, they do these amazing events. We did one up in Jackson Hole, which was like amazing. And again, because it's like Rick, you get these other really cool open-minded people, Matt Sorum, just drummers from like every band you could ever imagine. And then like, Nikki Sixx lives in Jackson Hole and they're friendly. We had Nikki there and those guys did a jam at a club. So, I just wind up producing these kind of events and a couple other charity events. Sometimes it's just a cover band or a tribute band or whatever. I produced the stage at LA Fleet Week now. This will be the third year coming up. Just been an amazing thing. It's at the battleship USS Iowa, docked in San Pedro. We run a stage all weekend long, and I book the talent and produce the stage. And again, you try to book your friends or bands will be well received or right for the show. And I'm probably again forgetting a lot of other things, but that's the kind of stuff that keeps me busy. I'm actually pretty soon going to fly out to Boston, back east, and New York, my old home, to produce some more Raven Drum events. We got a couple of great ones. One's coming up at the City Winery in Boston, and then at the Cutting Room in New York. And again, those are all benefit the Raven Drum Foundation, which takes care of all these great people. And I'm already putting the finishing touches on booking Fleet Week for this year, which is Memorial Day weekend. Got a couple of contracts loose, but the bands are all lined up, which is 4 days of band stages. Keeps me pretty busy.
I was going to actually.
Pearl's got new music coming out and more dates, and Cody's record dropping. So, and 12OC is about to drop a bomb on the world, amongst other things. So, it's there's other things that I'm pitching and working on and dealing with. I'm forgetting, but post WWE has been awesome, and I love those guys. I still stay in touch with those guys. I would be open to still working in pro wrestling. There's been some opportunities that have come up that have been discussed, or things that have branched off from it. Who knows? I don't think never say never, especially in the pro wrestling business. I think is a real thing. And I like working with like good people. I've been fortunate to work with like the best in class and the best in the world at all these things. And I may or may not be going out with one of the bands I mentioned earlier pretty soon as well to go back on the road, even though I wasn't thinking that was what I was going to do. And sometimes you can't say no,
That's awesome, man. You got so much stuff. Wow. It's just, I don't even know how do you just keep everything straight? You must have such details. Like your Outlook calendar just must be so full of everything.
You got to stay organized. And listen, I'll first say this. I can't take all the credit. I get to work with some really smart people. I'm never the smartest person in the room. If we are, we're fucked. Like you got to surround yourself with smarter people than you, better people than you, and learn what you can utilize. I'm learning how to use AI and all this stuff, but like you gotta always stay sharp, and you gotta stay as focused as you can. But you really need to. I really think the successes I've had have always been the team efforts. It's always having like the best people and learning and realizing, wow, like I make mistakes every fucking day, and I always will. Hopefully, I won't make the same mistakes too many times or even more than once. But it's really like having great people to work with, the best vendors. Keeping your relationships good, not being an asshole, like doing the best you can. Like everybody has bad days, but keeping sense of all of this stuff is difficult. But without having the support of the right teams and the right folks, you're just going to spin out. One thing I'll say for production in general is always do what you can as soon as you can, because time is everything, right? It's like, I remember when I first would go out on the road, I was like, oh, I'm going to show up later. I had this easier job. And, then you realize one of those days, the thing that you do, something's going to go wrong, right? Something will always go wrong. And then you're fucked. So you could have shown up early in the morning and got it done and then had an easy day. And then if that problem occurs, you're like, well, everything's already done. So let me just fix this thing. But if you wait to the last minute, you're going to bone yourself, because believe me, I've had the worst scenarios you could ever imagine, from natural disasters to security to terrorism to you name it, and just crazy shit. Like, really, the fucking lights at this major arena are not coming on. Like, well, we still have a sold out show. Are we canceling? I always say, well, what do we have? What works? I have a ring in this case, or a stage, but we don't have power. Well, fuck, maybe we could get a PA. Maybe we get a generator. Maybe we get a truck to back in here. Like I had a show up in Syracuse or somewhere, and it was like a snowstorm, which probably should have been canceled, but we all just stuck with it, and somehow we got that thing to happen,
Yeah.
And like, but because we got in early and because we got done what we could when we could, because then we were able to fix the problem. And without patting myself on the back in any way, I've always had sort of a good handle on pressure and problems. Somebody once told me, I work with another guy, and they're like, he's really good at this and this, but you're the guy I want when the building is on fire every time, because I try to stay really calm and cool, because I've had people screaming in my face like, ah, and I'm just like, well, I really want to scream in your face. I really want to punch you in your face, but I'm going to stay here. I'm going to do my mind yoga and stay cool, because I still have the same problem, even though you're screaming at me. Like, we still have this thing we have to do. So I can't freak out. I, of course, have lost my temper, and sometimes you got to step up. But I find that in a real crisis, I can handle it. In fact, I hate to say it, but I think I thrive on chaos in certain ways. But I do my best to avoid it, because life is so crazy. I don't need to add to that.
Yeah, no kidding. The older we get, the harder it is to maintain all that stuff too. So,
oh God, it's so hard, dude. I don't, I wake up now some days and I'm just like, I hear everything popping, and I try to stay in shape and stay healthy and keep moving. But now, like I said, I'm going to be 50 this year. And I was thinking about something that I was like, wow, that was 20 years ago or 25 years ago or whatever, more. And it blows my mind, and some things I feel like I'm better at now. And I'm obviously like healthier and live a better life than I did when I was a young maniac, especially when I was in the nightlife scene. You was up in New York City running clubs in New York. You work till 4. So you don't go home at 4:01,
Right.
The East Village in New York City at 4:00 in the morning is a crazy place, as you can imagine. So, but my life is much different now. I eat healthy and I live healthy, and I barely drink and do anything. So you just feel better and you feel like you can handle those things. But I think if I somehow continued to do the shit I used to do, there's no way I would, for a million reasons, be able to do what I still do now, because you have to adapt. And part of my adaptation is being better,
Yep. Nice. I got a few more questions, if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead, man. I'm enjoying this.
Well, awesome. I am too. It's so much information. So, I mean, you've got so much going on. I think you mentioned this earlier, but you've got so much going on. What do you do to kind of like cleanse your palate? What do you have, like hobbies or something else that you'll do just to kind of shut off or anything like that?
It's the most important thing I do is take care of myself. Like when I was with WWE, for example, just because of the insane traveling, right? Like the nonstop, I don't know if everybody knows this, but unlike say the NFL, they don't like go on break after Super Bowl, like and come back, months later. They do the WrestleMania and then have Monday Night Raw the next day, and then just go right back to work, often to Europe for a tour. So when I would have free time, whether it's on tour or whether it's at home between tours or loops for that matter, my thing is like mind, body, and soul, and like without like trying to come off like some guru or whatever. That's what works. I feel like my battery is down, and I have to do everything I can to recharge it so I can go back and do my job. So that's eating right, that's working out, that's hiking. Like for me, I'm a big outdoors guy, and living in New York City and then living on a tour bus and then living in an arena is not good for all of that. So at least in New York City, where I used to live, I would go to Central Park, or I would kayak on the Hudson, or I would out of New York and go. I used to have my friend had this awesome house in upstate New York. I would always go to, particularly after these tours, just to unwind or travel. And when I would go on tour with all these bands and WWE, for example, I would always try to see these places. If I could book some extra time, I would, just to like A, to chill out, decompress, B, to like be again mostly in nature or culture, like walking around some cool city somewhere. But, I like to hit the gym frequently and pretty hard. I love snowboarding. I lived in Portland, Oregon for a few years, and I was with WWE, and I had my like Tuesday, Wednesday, I would go to the mountain when no one's there. And it was like a dream. And here I live, now I live in Santa Susana, which is like just outside of LA County in the outskirts, kind of like where the old movie ranches are. And it's very natural here. It's like, it looks like John Wayne, who used to make movies here, would come over the hillside any day. So I have my dogs, which are like my kids in my life. And, we get out there and I play music, whether I'm actually playing music or listening to music. And, eat pretty well. Those are the things that I do, to stay sane, surf when the surfing's good, like ride a bike, all of that stuff. That's any amount or mix of that is what I do to do my job and to be happy.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah. Very important stuff, especially when you're on the road. Are you able to kind of get out and go kind of see anything, go around and anything like that?
It depends on the tour and the gig. I certainly had tours where I saw, as most people will tell you, yeah, like you must think it's glamorous and you see the world. Well, I saw the arena and I saw the parking lot and I saw the bus, but there were plenty of opportunities where, in my travels, where I've gotten a day, a couple of days, even longer, or sometimes a tour starts or ends somewhere where there happens to be some days off in between. WWE used to travel overseas, and like when you're in like the UK, you can kind of train hop a little bit, or I would do that sometimes. They have great train system in the UK, and the trains, like the central stations are like inevitably near the arenas. So you might be able to get out and walk around, or sometimes you can get in a day early or the night before. It really depends on, but yeah, I mean, I got to see like the Taj Mahal and like amazing, I went dog sledding in Alaska. I went shark diving in outside of Cape Town. Done some pretty rad shit with those little, and I'll tell you, I get the most out of a day. Like it's funny now, my girlfriend wants to go on these vacations. I'm like, how many days do you want to go there for? That sounds like forever. I need like a day and a half or 2 days. But then, you get somewhere nice and you're like, well, maybe we should stay a little longer. But yeah, I have seen the world. I've been very, very, very fortunate. I can't think of too many things left on my like bucket list of places I want to go. There's a lot I'd like to go back and spend more time. And I've done that post WWE. I've been like, that was a rad spot. I want to go there for like a real trip, as opposed to like, ooh, I blew through town really quick and saw the one penis statue in the museum or whatever. There's a penis statue in every city.
If you're up for it, I'd like to talk a little bit of gear with you, because I do video photography as well. I know you said you don't really do stills, but do you have preferences on what you're using? What's that?
I've never been paid or professionally done stills, but I've like shot a million. First of all, like everybody, I have a great camera in my pocket. So I've shot a million things for social stuff and for my own stuff and reporting. And I often work with the photographers I hire, and I'm like, here's your shot list. And I'm like, this is what you want to do. So I have a real opinion on all that. But as happens to be, I worked with some of the greatest photographers in the world, which be they the rock photogs, or be like guys like you that do live shows, be they guys who do portraits, be they the amazing guys who shoot WWE and, all these other guys. So like, who am I to be the one like to jump in there with my camera? But I have also made, I've been more for work done video, but I stare at, I go to photo galleries and I love imagery. I love certain, I can name a bunch of guys like Danny Clinch and amazing people that I follow and appreciate their work. So gear wise, man, I'm probably not the best guy to ask about that. Like I happen to have I have a Canon that's, that I like because I have it. And I had a Nikon before that I liked because I have it. So, there was a time when like, everybody wanted to use like, the sort of DSLR revolution was happening. And I had, a Canon 5D, which was a really good camera at the time. And if you had that camera, you could do certain jobs. Yep. And so I had that camera. But I've got a little point and shoot somewhere floating around here that's amazing that I'll keep in my pocket sometimes, but really it's the fucking iPhone, man. It's so good, and for what I do, that's really what I need, but for the pro stuff, I have a Pelican case downstairs with a bunch of lenses and a couple of bodies, and it's getting a little dusty, to be honest, but I would always get that information from guys who just do it. Like, yep. Like I'll talk to someone in the pit and like, what is that, man? What are you shooting with? Someone once told me, I forget this is how bad I am. I forget what lens it was, but I'll tell you, you'll know exactly what I mean. It's like a little nub of a lens, but it's really good in low light, which you shoot concerts. So I was on stage, and every time the lights would change, I was like bumping the f-stop and trying to make up for it. It was grainy and shitty. And then I got this lens and I was like, oh my God. And the colors came out better and the darkness wasn't there. And I couldn't believe I had wasted so many times shooting on this other thing. I actually wound up making I was in Germany and shooting Anthrax videos for like their German label. And I think the colors in that video I made are like the best I ever shot, because that show's really dark outside of the colorful lights on them. And that thing was just bringing out these like awesome purples and blues and reds. And I was like, oh my God, where has this lens been for so long? You know, you can't zoom with it very well.
Yeah. You're fixed to your prime. Are you doing your own editing and stuff like that? Or do you have a team that does all that stuff?
Yeah, I've done. I mean, I'm slow with it because I don't do it every day. Like I could certainly cut, I get it. But again, a lot of times I'm producing the content. So for one, I'll shoot it because I can, or I'll have the access, or I'll have the relationship. So it's better for me to like shove a camera in some guy's face who knows me and trusts me. But there's also been plenty of times where I'll hire the videographer or the photographer and or the editor. And, you know, I also like to work with certain, like I made a series of videos once, and I was working with an editor who got me, and he wasn't going to go out there. I was out there on the road, so I was shooting it and just sending it back to him. He would take a nice hack at it, and then I could give notes because I knew where the cool shit happened. This is where the guy gives the finger. This is where the lights popped at the right time. There's a guy in the crowd with his shirt over his head, you know. And so we just had a great working relationship. And with the pace that we needed to turn out that content, it made no sense for me. Like, you know, I can't remember half the shortcuts. You know, I've thought at many occasions. I once took a video production class like 20 years ago in New York, and I one day was like, I'm going to edit, you know, and I during COVID, I wished I had, because my friends got an amazing post and production company, and post is what kept him alive through COVID, because it was like the work you didn't have to shoot, right?
Right, yeah.
And then shooting slowly came back, and I was like, maybe I should brush up on my editing because I can make that money. But I just was getting hired to produce. So yes, sorry, everything's a long fucking winded answer with me, but I'm just like slow at cutting, and as much, but I feel like I'm good at giving direction to editors, and I'm also really good at media management, because I know how much of a dick it is to like hand someone a hard drive that's like not like labeled and organized. And when I shoot, I shoot with that in mind of like little bites. You know, I don't just sit there like just fucking running for 20 minutes or whatever, so that I can hand a bunch of really cool little spots. And now, you know, nowadays with social, you know, you got to like, well, I need like a 15-second spot and a 30-second spot and a minute spot, and this is long form. So I really think in those ways more than I ever have before.
Yep. Yeah. That was my, my thing during COVID is like, you know, there was no shows anymore. So I, you know, just went to my regular day job, and I just like, I'm going to buckle down on all my skills, and I'm going to sharpen every skill I have, and just get out there and get it done. And, you know, it really made a huge difference once everything turned back on. I'm like, wow, I'm rolling pretty good through this stuff, you know. And
you're banging through it. Like, I mean, that's awesome. Totally. It's a great skill to have, you know?
Yep. Definitely. Yeah. Awesome. So when, where do people find you on like socials? Do you want to share any of that information?
Yeah, sure. I mean, as I said earlier, my Instagram is at Matt_Han_Ra_Han. So you can phonetically spell my name, Matt, at Matt Hanrahan. So stupid. During COVID, I started a food account, Mateo's Tacos, which I just yesterday realized I hadn't posted anything on in 3 years or something. It's crazy that COVID's that long ago. So I just posted a reel on that. But I don't care if anyone goes there. But if you like food and tacos like I do, Mateo's Tacos. The Outlier group is where everything that really is important business-wise is. I haven't really I used to have a King Size USA. I used to have a website, kingsize-USA, which was like updated constantly, like during the days of Blogger. And I would put, you know, every update. But once Jason and I really decided to work together on Outlier, I just kind of said, let's do this. I liked the name, the branding, the look. So that's where the roster is. We're going to eventually update that more with like services, which is more like the capabilities. One of the things, by the way, I do also is I book talent for the Lip Service podcast, which is one of Spin's music podcasts. Yep. Scott Lips, who's an awesome host. We've had, you know, everybody on there, you know, Maynard from Tool, and, you know, we've had guys from, you know, from Hollywood as well as musicians, but mostly a music site. So, you know, my work is there. If you look at on any podcast platform and YouTube, you look up the Lip Service podcast. But, you know, to get me really, I use Instagram. I'm on Facebook, Matt Hanrahan. but Outlier is the best way in terms of just like the music. And as I mentioned, should eventually have production capabilities, the talent buying, influencer stuff, all the stuff that I do to pay the rent.
Nice. Yeah, you get so much cool stuff. All right. Well, just for, maybe one last question for the road there, but when you're, do you have a favorite tour, favorite moment? Was there something that you can remember? I'm putting you on the spot, but was there something that stuck out that you're like, man, I can't believe this is incredible. This is amazing.
I mean, I could say that a lot of times, unfortunately, it'd be really, really, I don't know if there's one, but it's like, it depends on the point of view too. Cause I've been in the crowd for some of those moments where I'm like, oh my God, this was the fucking best thing I ever saw. Like I once saw Pete Townsend, like unplugged at I forget the place, like the Jane or something in New York City. Like a friend called me last minute, get down here. Pete's playing in front of like 100 people and like Eddie Vedder's in the crowd with Matt Dillon, and it was like just mind blowing to watch him with like, Lou Reed and shit. That's just being a fan of music. And that, right. I've said that a lot to people from my small club experience. And then like, being at like maybe a Stone show or a WrestleMania or something just massive for that spectacle or download some of those like moments there.
Huge.
I mean, being on the stage looking out from download is a pretty amazing fucking thing. Standing on the stage at Bonnaroo while John Paul Jones was up there with C6 Steve, that was once like, holy shit. I was there. I was working with Damon Albarn at the time. I was production manager for Damon Albarn, which was an amazing experience. I somehow forgot about until just now. That was unreal. And, those are all really good. I mean, it's crowd stuff too. I've seen like people propose, and I've seen like kids in tears. I've seen, John Cena make a million Make-A-Wish moments happen. And that's heart-wrenching and awesome. And, oh God, I don't know. So I'll tell you one, coming out of COVID, having not done it in would have been a few years, I produced Jason and I worked together, and he booked and I produced the Spin South by Southwest event at Stubbs, which was the first South by after COVID. And like, we hadn't really been around these big, little things I'd done. So all of a sudden it's like the headline, I think, of the show. And I'm walking the barricade, the path up to front of house. And I turn around, and because I'm looking at everybody who's looking this way, right? And I see everybody's faces and just like the joy and that like, we're back. It was like, we're back. You know what I mean? I was back where I felt most comfortable, like working at a concert situation, and the fans were getting what they'd been missing, which was live music and entertainment and being around each other. And that was a fucking huge feeling of like, because there was moments I didn't know if we'd ever do it again. Right. So yep. I think that's, I hadn't thought of that initially, but it just came to me. And I feel like that's maybe one of the best moments I've ever had.
Yeah. I mean, incredible, especially coming back from COVID, because, for our venue that I worked at, all of 2020 was obviously shut down. 2021, things started to come back, but there was, distance separation.
Yeah. All those crazy rules.
It makes no sense, but it had to be done for a concert. So no one could sit next to each other at a concert, but everyone's standing in line at the bathroom. So it was really bizarre stuff, but it was just the way it was. It wasn't anybody's fault. It's just the way it was. But everyone was just so fired up after sitting at home for a year. Everyone was just so fired up to be back out and enjoy it. It was amazing. It was a great time.
The comeback concerts were phenomenal.
Yep. Yeah. Well, Matt, amazing. Thank you so much for your time. I mean, we could probably spend another 2 hours just talking about stuff that you're like, oh, and this thing and that thing. Just incredible. I really appreciate your time for this.
Well, I'm thrilled to do it. It was fun to like go back down memory lane, dust out the cobwebs a little bit. Clearly, I like talking about myself. All my friends will laugh and hear me say that. And I love it, man. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for watching this episode with Matt Hanrahan. We hope you enjoyed it. You can check out our other guests, all our other episodes on all your favorite podcast locations and on YouTube. Search for Tales from the Pit podcast. Also, check us out on talesfromthepit.net, and we'll see you on the next one. This episode was edited and produced by me, Jason Lavasser.